Congratulations. If you're on Facebook, chances are you can add Lab Rat to the many titles that you already hold. That's because we found out late Friday that Facebook conducted a scientific study in which it experimented with users' moods by manipulating some posts in the news feed. For 1 week in January 2012, data scientists skewed what they say is almost 700,000 Facebook users saw when they logged into the service. In some cases, feeds were peppered with happy, positive words. Others had sadder than average content appear. At the end of the week, people who saw positive messages tended to use more positive language in their posts. Those who had negative messages appear used more negative language. It's often said when a product is free, you are the product. So does word of this experiment come as a surprise to you?
What comes as a surprise to me is that this was published in the academic press in a peer-reviewed journal, because that is where the difference lies in how we do research and whether the IRB needs to approve it.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. We have a familiarity with the IRB as people who do research here with human subjects at the university. Can you describe for our audience what the IRB is and how it works?
Of course. First of all, the IRB stands for Institutional Review Board.
Okay.
It is designed to protect human subjects from experiencing some sort of risk they wouldn't normally experience, and to keep, deviant researchers like myself, or devious, not deviant, devious researchers like myself from, putting them at risk. So it's designed to protect the subjects. It is also designed to protect the university from litigation. The whole thing is set up so that we avoid risk. We avoid putting people in bad situations, such as where we manipulate their emotional states without them knowing it.
Okay.
So, however, companies, and this is if you want to publish in a peer-reviewed journal or send it to a peer-reviewed conference, okay? Companies like Facebook, they can do proprietary company research all the time. They don't have
and
to
likely do.
And likely do. They are doing these experiments all the time. The difference is that it's proprietary. It doesn't get published anywhere. We never find out about it. So the fact that this made it into PNAS, this big journal, and that they collaborated with two academic researchers.
Somebody from Cornell University and University of California, San Francisco.
Right. That's what makes this different. So in some ways, I would say, this is unethical based on our academic standards for IRB for many reasons. It's unethical because they didn't, set out the IRB so it was easy to find. It was just sort of buried in the 10 pages terms of service, right? That's one reason why it was unethical. Another reason is they didn't debrief them at the end saying, hey, we just messed with your feed. Do you feel okay? And that's what you have to do as a responsible researcher. Now, taking another tactic, I would say this is valuable because otherwise we don't have access to any of that data and Facebook can just use it for their own gain. So it's kind of like, well, would we rather know that this is happening and have it published in a place that we can all access it and people can analyze it? Does that make sense? So it's,
it does, yeah.
Here's the thing that I would think is the takeaway from me as a social media user and particularly a Facebook user is that someone is always watching, someone is always paying attention, and someone is always evaluating, gauging, assessing, in some way adding value or a value judgment to what it is that I'm doing, with the idea that either they're going to make money on it, they're going to learn more from it, but that this is not a private experience. And, the more we say it, the less it seems to resonate. Using social media is not a private experience. It is not something you're doing in private. And even having the presumption that it is probably is a little bit naive. That having been said, everything that Amanda just said about what researchers should do stands, right?
Mm-hmm. So there has been some pressure on the journal that published it to pull the study, to retract it. Is that something that happens, or is that kind of the social media world reacting and saying, you did something we don't like, so take it back?
Well, I was sort of trying to follow the trail of where they talk about informed consent, and I actually went to the article to read it. And basically, Facebook contends that they had informed consent. Somebody else posted that they started the emotional manipulation before they had that in the terms of service. And so, in fact, they don't have informed consent. So this is not Facebook's problem. This is Cornell's problem. This is UC San Francisco, their problem. I would be very worried if I were those researchers or those institutions, because they basically waived their informed consent process and said, Facebook took care of this. And now that opens them up to attack So that's where I would be concerned. I know that sounds like, again, a lot of sort of like insider stuff, but really it hurts the credibility of the researchers at those institutions, because everyone's going to think, well, you don't care about my emotional state. You're just going to, when you get access to all this data. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd love to have access to all of this data. When you get access to this, you're just going to waive your process. That's where the questions are, and there's a little bit of passing the buck happening there.